Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project with EC Synkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings, and every episode I have the distinct privilege of presenting EC with a question on subject matters that range from nutrition to fitness to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both the principles at play and the actions worth carrying out as a result, we aim to get you thinking, get you moving, and get you taking more consistent steps toward optimizing your well-being. Thank you as always for tuning in. And how are you today, EC?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm hungry. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm kind of hungry. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to, as we often do, go back to your Instagram. And there's a post that says on the graphic there that it's okay to be hungry. It is part of the weight loss process. And so I want to talk to you about that. But I also wonder if we can't broaden the conversation out a little bit more, because I think that there are principles at play as it relates to being hungry and being okay with that and sort of accepting that as part of the process and the rest of our life and other areas of our lives where we can kind of take a lesson from nutrition, or maybe we can bring a lesson from outside into our nutrition to get a better sense of it. Mm-hmm. Before we do that, we want to let folks know about a company, about a brand that you work alongside, that you partake in, that you think listeners of this podcast would particularly be interested in, and that is SteadyMD. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. I have been using SteadyMD for over a year now, and essentially it's concierge doctor service. You text your doctor, you video chat your doctor. They get back to you within a day with any questions. So after you Google all the things you want to know about your health, you can actually ask your doctor directly what they think about it. And I just think it's super convenient. And the other thing I want to point out about SteadyMD is they have a lot of doctors on staff who are fitness minded, whether or not that's CrossFit related, whether or not that's powerlifting related. So they also have that angle. They're not necessarily going to tell you to stop squatting or something like that. So it's just been a really great service, and it can allow for a lot of flexibility. And I think they often take HSA or FSA plans depending on kind of your specifics. So I encourage people to check it out.
I imagine they won't ask you to stop squatting, but perhaps they'll ask you to stop Googling things before you call them. That's my guess.
I like it for sure.
All right, cool. So if folks want to check out SteadyMD, we left a link to it in the show notes, and you can also go to steadymd.com/optimizemenutrition. Obviously all one word. Okay, let's get into this conversation about being hungry. Where should we begin? We've talked about it before. I imagine, and you've kind of confirmed it, that a lot of folks who reach out to you on some level are looking for a little bit of weight loss or a lot of weight loss. And again, I imagine that this is part of the conversation that needs to happen. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Weight loss is, at least 90%, if not more, the goal that people have when they talk to me or have questions. And this runs the gamut from I have a substantial amount of weight to lose to I'll talk to CrossFitters who are already very fit in every sense of the imagination, but they don't have their visible abs yet. They want to quote lean out. So right, it's always coming back to this weight loss, lean out, tone up type of thing. And that process is hard, and I want people to get there. I want people to reach their goals. But that's sort of overlooked because the difficulty of it, because there's so much gimmicky marketing out there and all these various nutrition products, take these low carb cookies or drink this pre-workout energy drink. And we need to be honest about the process that change requires hard work. And I kind of want to take a couple examples there, take that pre-workout energy shake, that's super easy to do, to drink something 30 minutes before a workout. Regardless of whether the ingredients actually have any proven effect for performance, the bigger lever that's going to drive your performance that day is not the pre-workout shake. It's how hard you work in the workout, right? And that's harder to do. It's more of a sacrifice. We could look at supplementation, take a supplement for inflammation. Maybe there's a small short-term effect somewhere, but what has more of an effect? Losing weight and keeping it off in the long term. Way harder to do, more of a sacrifice. And so the bigger the change that you want relative to where you are, the more difficult it's going to be. There's more of a sacrifice. I like the phrase analogy here, like you got to pay to play. You got to have some skin in the game. And in weight loss, some of that skin in the game, some of that difficulty, some of that sacrifice is that you are, in fact, going to be hungry during the process. I think what is hard about that is like, unlike other things where you do more to get things done, like in work or in school, maybe you study more hours, right? Or in performance, you work out more, you have to lift more weight. That's not really true in dieting, right? Part of the hard part is dealing with the hunger for weeks and months to see the effect. And so I get it. It's probably not the best sales strategy. It's probably not the best sales strategy for me in nutrition, but it's the truth. If you want these big changes, you're going to need a lot of hard work to do it. And you should expect to do something very different than what you're currently doing if you truly want to see a big change. Like supplements aren't a big change from what you're currently doing. You shouldn't expect a big result from them. Expect the level of results from the effort that you put in. And I think really this is kind of what you were getting to in the beginning, is that this is mirrored in every process around us in life, right? Like you have to work hard to get big results, and you 100% can do it, but we need to expect and embrace that adversity of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm running through my mind to see if there's kind of a comparison out there, not nutrition related, but it's interesting. You talk about school, right? Or really anything like building a business, right?
Totally.
The belief is like, okay, well, we just got to work harder, right? We got to put in more hours. We've got to grind harder. And in this, it's like the more is actually doing less. You've got to stop doing things. You've got to decide to do nothing. And, again, it's interesting. I can't think of too many other scenarios where that's actually the case, where improvement is non-action.
Yeah. I mean, I would say in some cases, there's going to be more in the sense of if somebody is very lean and they want to get, now visible abs, they might do more in the sense of they have to track their food now to a very precise degree. So the work might be there in other ways, but some of the work isn't going to be done just by physical exertion. Some of the work is sitting there and not eating.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. Okay. So I think maybe the first place to dive in, or the first question I've got, is why?
Yeah.
Like, why isn't, the low carb cookies versus just, maybe being hungry for an hour before dinner? Why is that the case?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit, and especially in relation to COVID and our health, but the body is remarkably resilient against change. From a performance and a weight loss perspective, the body wants to stay as it is. The body wants to preserve homeostasis because all of these processes that run life require very specific temperatures and acidity of the cellular fluid and pressure. So even though the environment changes around us, we've got lots of ways that internally we adjust so that those environmental external changes don't make dramatic changes on the inside. Now, this is actually great because we would have already died already if we were so sensitive to those like fluctuations in external temperature, like I said, or pressure. We would have already kind of combusted. I gave you another example recently in a post. Like, think about how much you eat on Thanksgiving Day, that extreme versus like, oh, we can go for 24 hours without food and we're still alive. So the body is remarkably resilient. That also means, though, it's going to be hard to make change. You need enough pressure at a high enough dose to drive this permanent change. And I think the way to think about this high enough pressure is the pressure is the degree of change. And the dose is how long you have that change going on for, like how long, what's the cumulative effect of that? And so in weight loss, you could think about it as like there might be a pressure of a 500 calorie a day deficit on your diet. And the dose, that would be, if you did it for 7 days, 3,500 calorie deficit, and you might lose a pound. Right. So for most things, we can't apply enough pressure on any single day. We can't like eat negative 7,000 calories in one day to drive weight loss in one day. So we have to look at like, what's a daily dose that I can handle and get the results that I want. And so this is where we have some choice. We could stick with a weight loss example, or we could go elsewhere. And I really like these investment analogies, especially when we're looking at like weight loss and long-term stuff. So if we're looking at kind of this investment analogy, we could take something, let's say it's like too low of a pressure, and so we don't accumulate enough dose. This could be something like saving a penny a day for retirement. Yes, you're doing something, but like you accumulate $365 a year. And if you're saving for 30 years, we probably have still less than a few $1,000s at the end, even with compounding interest, right? So too low a pressure, we don't accumulate enough dose. If we did more pressure, like $10 a day for 30 days, I think that takes us up closer to like $500,000 if we're looking at something with some return on investment. But then we have to ask the question, is that enough? Like, I don't know. What are your living expenses? What type of retirement lifestyle do you want? How many years do you plan to live in retirement, right? And so it's this game of determining those factors and what, of course, is a realistic pressure. I mean, saving $100 a day is more of a foolproof retirement strategy, but that pressure is way too great for most people, any of us mere mortals, right? So they need that money to live. It's this balance kind of pressure and dose that accumulate over time in a meaningful way for change. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of, pressure and dose and finding the right balance between those two and looking at them both as levers, right? To figure out, okay, if I move this one up a little bit and that one down a little bit, where do I go? And it reminds me of, and you tell me, it seems similar to something we've talked about before, which is this minimum viable dose. Is that roughly the same concept that we've talked about before?
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison, and I hadn't thought of it before. But yeah, I mean, your minimum viable dose, minimum effective dose, it's what pressure are you putting on yourself to get the outcome that you want? And ideally, you do the least amount of pressure for that outcome. Yeah, I like that comparison a lot.
So it's annoying, but true that achieving anything, weight loss, retirement goals, whatever, implicit in that is a certain amount of challenge and difficulty, right? That's kind of the pay to play that you had mentioned before. Like that's you've got to just accept that and then go forward, right?
Totally. I mean, I think with all of our goals, and heck, I say it to myself running a business, change is not easy. And you have to kind of remind yourself of that. If change were so easy and all of these great endpoints were so, within our reach, then everyone would be at their ideal weight and optimal health. They'd be the best athlete. They'd have the, bajillion-dollar business or whatever it is. And we have to remember that because in marketing, we're given the end result or what's supposed to be the end result. I mean, if they got it that way, but we don't necessarily see all the sacrifices in the day-to-day work to get there. And so you don't want to be fooled into thinking that you want something that's easy, because if it's too easy, I don't think there's going to be enough pressure to get the results you want, going back to that kind of like supplement or pre-workout, shake analogy. And I do think it's important to kind of draw this distinction between easy and simple, because I do hope that I bring some simplicity to nutrition, but I don't think that necessarily that simplicity means that it's going to be easy. Easy for me is something that person can accomplish right now without a second thought, like the supplement, right? I can take this now. I can drink this or whatever. I can have the low carb cookie. That's something easy to do. That's not going to drive a lot of change. Now, simple is easy to understand, from a mental comprehension level, but it may or may not be easy to do. And I think the 800-gram challenge is a great example of this. It's very simple in concept, but it's not necessarily easy. It's certainly easy for some who have already kind of aligned their diet that way, but it's not for others. And I would argue that the harder it is for somebody to do the 800-gram challenge, the more benefit they're going to see from it. And so when we see all these marketing claims and these different products, I would challenge the person to think about it in the sense of how easy is that going to be for me to accomplish? And in fact, to shy away from the ones that seem almost too easy or are too easy, because the benefit will be in the ones that have the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough sometimes. That's tough to even just ask yourself the question of, is this pre-workout, supplement or shake or whatever, am I fooling myself here? Am I fooling myself that this is actually the solution to the problem that I've identified? Even just asking that question, I think, can sometimes be hard, because then you've got to be honest with yourself. If the answer is like, this can't possibly be a low carb cookie, can't possibly actually solve my problem.
I love it. I love it. And to be honest, I think there is some of that in the nutrition space of like, well, this is better than nothing. It's almost like mediocre, like mental insurance that you're doing something. I don't know what it is, but it's like you're putting in some investment somewhere, but you're not really doing much, right?
Yeah, it's I always think about a lot of people, you can interchange the words, but a lot of people confuse motion with progress, right? Yeah. And it feels a little bit like that, where it's like, well, I'm making a decision, but you're not actually making any improvements whatsoever. You're just moving.
Totally. I love that. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So given all that, where do we begin to maybe counteract that, to fight against maybe our natural urges to pick the easy option when that's not the optimal one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting clear about not necessarily the end point that you want. I mean, that obviously you have to know, but getting more clear about the process that is required to get there. And that's really, in terms of nutrition, what a lot of what we do in my masterclass is. I actually have very little interest in telling you what to do, but I want you to be very clear on what you'd have to do for the outcome that you want. You know, if you've picked this visible abs goal as the degree to which you want to be lean, all right, let's be really clear about what you're going to have to do there. To get there, and then you decide, am I interested now? Do I want to pay to play that game? Is that something I'm willing to do? And again, I think, you know, we have to look at, I like using some other examples besides just kind of the leaning out thing. I think people are always like, oh, you know, wouldn't it be nice to just be a full-time athlete like those games athletes? And they forget about all the sacrifice.
No, it wouldn't be.
I think they forget about all the sacrifice, what it really means to do that. I mean, I know perennial former games athlete who had difficulty tying their shoes in the morning because they were so sore and they couldn't get up from the dinner table to get their second. So we have to make sure that, like, when we have these goals, that we're very crystal clear on the process to get there. And so again, coming back to this leaning out process and the visible abs, this is a lot of the masterclass. When we get to the level of precision that people need to have these super lean body compositions, they're like, oh, wow, that's a high degree of precision. And I will be hungry at times. And am I willing to do that?
I love this idea of pressure and dose. Where do you begin? Maybe either in this conversation around diet, visible abs, hunger, all that stuff, or even maybe more generally, like, how does a person start to figure out, like, okay, what am I actually able to, you know, again, back to the levers, like, what lever can I pull on or push on to give me the right pressure? And same with the dose. Like, where do you begin to identify where those levers even are? Like, does that make sense?
No, I think it does. I'm going to answer it is the way I interpret it. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if it answers your question. But yeah, I mean, I think this is where, and I kind of talk about this a lot with getting people started. You know, it's this idea, like with nutrition, to make some changes. I often start with the question of, what did you have for breakfast? And maybe we can sub out the pastry for a banana at Starbucks, or just add a banana to the order, regardless of what it is. And let me tell you right now, that's not going to be enough pressure. But there's going to be some time that we have to put aside the physiological changes to get the mental side on board, to build the motivation, to get the psychological buy-in and the desire to do it. And so there might be a part there of figuring out, you know, where the person's buy-in is right now, and kind of knowing that that might not be where we have to stay. And in fact, it probably won't be. And knowing that some things that you do early on in the process aren't actually going to drive many changes. And that's okay. That's part of the process. But ultimately, we have to work up to the high enough pressure and dose. And we can only do that by first figuring out what their tolerance is now. Right.
I imagine optimizing for whatever is sustainable and consistent, whether that's a retirement strategy or a weight loss strategy. I imagine that it, like you just kind of implied, that especially at the start, you want to figure out that right balance of pressure and dose that allows you to do it long enough, do it until you can ramp either one of those things up, right?
Yeah. Going back to your analogy, in the beginning, I just need motion. I don't need progress, you know?
Interesting.
And then we can start to direct that motion somewhere. But in the beginning, the motion is more important, because once we have no motion, we have nothing. There's no chance of progress, right?
Right. That's such a good point. Yep.
But it's always that, is kind of figuring out the tolerance level. And of course, with more, you know, motion, for lack of a better word now in this analogy, you know, we are going to start to get progress. I just need there to be some motion.
All right. Starting to wrap this conversation up about the need for, let's just call it sacrifice, the need for some amount of discomfort on the way towards our goals, whatever those goals may be. Anything else worth mentioning? Anything else worth talking about that I haven't asked you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would just add on, like, I don't want this conversation to be like the Debbie Downer, like everything's impossible, right? Like, no, you definitely can do it. You definitely can get the visible abs, but you just have to know going in that there will be difficulty and sacrifice, and embrace it. And again, you know, this is where the great leaders and athletes emerge, right? I mean, what's Matt Fraser's hashtag? Hard work pays off, right?
Yeah.
And until you kind of do that, you're kind of going to be spinning your wheels. You're going to be doing these things this is the really common one. Maybe you have a right enough pressure, but you don't have a long enough dose of it. And that would be like the diets you stick to for a week. Or again, the supplement example is there's just not enough pressure. So you're really just kind of spinning your wheels until you find that right balance. And a lot of that is going to be embracing that the difficulty is part of the process. Yeah.
How do you identify, or how would you help somebody identify if they're in the position, like maybe they've kind of figured something out, but it is in fact just spinning their wheels? Is there any easy way to say, okay, like I appreciate that you're doing something, but that's not enough? Is there any way for an individual to kind of know that that's the case? Or is it sometimes you just got to go through that time and time again before you recognize, okay, I've clearly got to do something different here, or I've got to do something more?
Yeah, I mean, I think results are always going to be their guide, right? You know, if they're 4 weeks in on whatever their change is, and they've done it consistently, of course, and they don't see any changes in the body composition, health, performance, whatever they're chasing, hey, it's probably not enough pressure. I mean, maybe what you've done is you've done a good psychological habit progression, and now you know that you can stick to something, and maybe that's the win. But in terms of the right enough pressure for the physiological change, it just will show up in the result, right?
Yep. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who tunes in. Thank you to everybody who sends us a rating or uploads a rating. Do you upload a rating? I don't know if you upload a rating.
I don't know
Writes
either.
A rating. Whatever the verb is for leaving a rating, thank you for it. We do read all of them and appreciate them. We'll be back very soon with another episode of The Consistency Project.